Welcome to the Poetry of Healing show. I am Dr. Paulina Van, the host, and as you can see, I have a special guest with me, Dr. Ernest J. Grant. And I want to tell you, he may look really reserved and conservative, but I want to let you know that this is a powerhouse that we're going to hear from today. And what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the experiences of racism among Black nurses. And Dr. Grant is the critical piece to this discussion. He's been the past president of the ANA, which is the largest organization, over 100 years old, that represents nurses, and there are over 400 million nurses in the United States. And Dr. Grant is the first male to hold this position. He's also been recognized as by the president as the Nurse of the Year, and Modern Healthcare has named him several times as one of the 100 most influential people in healthcare. More importantly, or just as important, he was recently named as one of the top diversity leaders in the United States. But in my perception, he's the top diversity leader in the whole world. So, Dr. Grant, I want to welcome you to the show. And I hope that my introduction was well. After we do a centering, and we typically begin with a centering, I will ask you to introduce yourself. Okay. All right. Thank you. And so, viewers, I'm going to ask you to, this is an invitation, and we do the centering so that we can focus on this time we have together. It's a special time. It's a gift to be able to just sit or lie or relax, or if you're walking, to listen to this very, very important discussion. It's important not only to nurses, but to the communities and individuals, families that we serve. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to lower your gaze, and we're just going to take some nice deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Just do it slowly. And what's important is that when you focus on your breathing, continue to breathe, it acts as an anchor to bring you into the present moment. So we're doing it now, but you can also do it at any time when you need to collect your thoughts and just be present. And so I'm going to ask you to take a nice deep breath in and imagine your heart expanding as you take that breath in. And as you take your breath out, imagine your heart contracting. Okay, and we're doing this very slowly. And those of you who have been with me, you know this is heart math. It's a heart math practice to relax you. So take a nice deep breath in through your nose, and your heart's expanding, and then out through your mouth, and your heart's contracting. And this last breath we're going to take together. Take a deep breath in, and then I'd like you to just remember something, the last thing that made you smile or made your heart happy. Okay, might have been a place, a person, a pet, an accomplishment. And then as you breathe out, I'd like you to enclose that memory in your heart. Okay, take a nice deep breath in and be aware of your surroundings, and out. And then this breath you're going to take in, and as you exhale, you're going to enter this session. So for those of you who are just joining us, I'm Dr. Paulina Van. I'm with our special guest, Dr. Ernest J. Grant. I think I said it wrong the first time.
You said it right.
Yeah, I did. Okay. All right. And today we're going to be talking about the experiences of Black nurses in the profession and how their experiences with marginalization, racism has really impacted and shaped their experiences. And so, Dr. Grant, again, welcome. And I just ask you to talk about yourself. Let the viewers know, as a male nurse, leader, innovator, mover and shaker, how did you get to this point? Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Van, for having me on your show. It's absolutely a delight to be here. I generally tell people how I got into nursing was sort of an unusual path. And by that, I mean, when I was in high school, as I like to say, if you had told me that was going to be a nurse, I would have told you that you were crazy, because my ambition in life was to become an anesthesiologist and drive a lime green 1968 Mercury Cougar. To me, that car was and still is the bomb. So your audience can look that up a little bit later, and I think they'll see why I still love that car. But I grew up the youngest of 7 kids, single parent. My father died when I was 5, and grew up in the mountains of North Carolina. And my high school guidance counselor suggested that instead of going to medical school, because I wanted to become an anesthesiologist, he suggested, well, how about going to nursing school, and you could become a certified registered nurse anesthetist. And at this time, this is in the mid 70s, we knew that there were very few scholarships available for medical school. Didn't matter what color your skin was at that time, but definitely even fewer scholarships that may have been available for a person of color. So as I thought about it, I figured, well, okay, I'll give it a try. And then he suggested that I go into the local community college, or back then it was called the Technical Institute, that they had a 1-year nursing program where you could become a LPN, or a licensed practical nurse. And he says, if you like that, then you could easily transition into the associate degree program, and then go on from there. What that would do is just delay your eventually becoming a CRNA by about a year if you perhaps didn't like nursing. Well, about 3 months into the LPN program, I really realized that nursing was my calling, and just totally forgot all about going to medical school and becoming a CRNA. I wanted to advocate on behalf of my patients. And also at that time, I looked around and I noticed that there weren't many people like me, an African American male who was a nurse. That was a rarity. I think back in the 70s, men who were in nursing, we probably made up about less than 3% of the nurses that were practicing at the time. Currently today, depending on who you read, we're probably about 12% of the total nursing population. But African Americans are even less than that, and particularly African American men. Actually, a group that I just founded, or helped to co-found, actually a year ago today, as well. We call it the Network of Black Male Nurse Leaders. It's a mentoring group to mentor young Black men who are interested in leadership positions within the profession. And but we discovered that the numbers are so few that they cannot be accounted for. So there's something wrong with that picture. And even as far back in the early 70s, one of the things that I did was to begin to champion getting more men and ethnic minorities into the nursing profession, because those of you who've heard me speak before have heard me say time and time again, I am a firm believer that nursing should be reflective of the people that we care for. And as the country, we're seeing the browning of America. There's no way you're going to stop that wave, but we do need to make sure that nursing is inclusive of that. So we need to seize every opportunity that we can to get more men, and particularly men of color, and more ethnic minorities to enter the nursing profession as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, um, before we go on, I want to ask you, did you ever get that green cougar?
Nope, I have several models of it. I have everything from like a 2-inch model to
Hmm.
probably about an 8-inch model. But that's sort of maybe my North Star. That once I retire, I do have
Uh-huh.
a nephew who restores old cars,
Hmm.
and so I figured that's a project that he and I will be able to work on together and restore that car. And then uh, once I uh, once we get it restored, then drive it across country.
Hmm. Hmm. So, Dr. Grant, I really appreciated that historical perspective and look back. It's very motivating. There are listeners now who want to become nurses and may not be able
Mhm.
to go uh, bachelor's or the accelerated programs. And so just starting anywhere in the profession is a start. So
Yes.
thank you for that.
Mhm.
What is one thing, because you've been on Good Morning America, you several times.
Yes.
But what is one thing about you that we don't know that may be motivating, surprising?
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Well, I could probably tell you a couple of things. One, I'm a gentle giant, even though I stand 6'6",
Yes.
and I realize how very imposing that can be. But I really am just a gentle giant and teddy bear at heart.
Hmm.
Number two, I love music. Particularly, I was actually classically trained pianist, and I do organ backup for my church. And I guess, well, let's see, I collect koala bears. So I love that, and I love to bake. So that's four things that you didn't know about me.
And I would have never guessed. And
Yeah.
so, viewers, uh, Dr. Grant, with his very gentle giant self, is still even imposing
Mhm.
against on me in a wonderful way, though.
Mhm.
In a
Yeah.
wonderful way. Pre the show, I was stumbling around, and I said, "Dr. Grant, it's you." So, but I do admire and respect you greatly and all that you have done for
Thank
nursing and sharing your path.
you.
It all makes sense.
Mhm.
What you're doing today all
Mhm.
makes sense. So let's get into the experiences of Black nurses, and we're just going to talk. I have some prompts, but we can go
Mhm.
really anywhere. So I'm going to start with, for the last 22 consecutive years,
Mhm.
nurses have been recognized by the Gallup poll as the most respected profession. But even given that,
Mhm.
Black nurses' experiences is not, their experience may not necessarily be reflective
Mhm.
of that respect. Matter of fact, using your words,
Mhm.
they've been limited in their growth
Mhm.
and their professional development
Mhm.
for many, many years. And so I just want to set the stage. And if you can, before we get into the ANA, I
Mhm.
just would like you to share some examples of marginalization that nurses have experienced in practice, education, policy research. One or
Mhm.
all would
Well,
be.
thank you
Mhm.
for asking that question. I think first of all, let's perhaps start out with nursing education. And you sort of have to look at maybe where the country was, 30, 40 years ago, and because we're still, on the upswing of the civil rights movement, and the country's just getting over the sort of separate but equal, if you will, mentality, but that still should not have been a roadblock, but it certainly served as one. When you have historically Black schools of nursing or Department of Nursing at universities and et cetera, um, finding it very difficult to either get clinical for their students to be able to get the clinical hours in order to successfully complete the requirements and write the NCLEX exam. That's one thing. Or if it was a Black student who was trying to get into a nursing school and be told by maybe the head of admissions or even the dean of the program, oh, people like you have a difficult time here, or are you sure this is what you want to do? Those are examples of, roadblocks, if you will, or just, outright, racism that is rearing its ugly head. And of course, I can understand, perhaps in the latter part of the 60s, early 70s, when we did see more integration of society, that, a lot of white institutions didn't know, well, what do you do with, these people of color who are, coming in? And it was a change from the norm, if you will, with, again, the norm being the old separate but equal, and which we know was not equal as well. So that created some roadblocks. But I think, as that continued, though, and you begin to see where a number of, if nurses chose to go to historic Black institutions, sometimes their passage rates were not well on the NCLEX exam. So the schools would either be on probation or et cetera, because a lot of times they either have inferior, textbooks or inferior labs and et cetera. A lot of times they got hand-me-downs from other schools and et cetera. So it was difficult for them to perhaps meet the standard. And of course, that's public knowledge that, if they were on probation and such. So a lot of times, sometimes people would get the idea that if you graduated from a HBU, that your training may not have been as well as it was had you gone to a predominantly white institution. And I myself, as well as I've heard other people say as well, have been challenged, if you will, that I can remember being floated to a nursing floor to help out and being questioned. First of all, were you with housekeeping? And no, I'm not with housekeeping. I'm a nurse. Are you with dietary? No, I'm a nurse. Oh, well, what school did you graduate from? And again, as if that's going to determine, your credibility, or perhaps the credibility of that person. That if you went to what they considered maybe a good nursing school, then yeah, I'm not going to worry about you. But if you went to one that they maybe considered inferior, then perhaps they would feel that you're not worthy to not only be on the floor, but perhaps to even be in the profession of nursing to begin with. So those are some examples of stumbling blocks from an educational perspective that not only Black nurses, but other nurses of color has had to overcome, and still are having to overcome those prejudices. I think in the workplace setting as well, some of the things, the lack of ability for promotion. We know that right now across the country, most nurses of color have an associate's degree. Yes, there's an easier pathway now to get that baccalaureate. You can go online or whatever, but for a lot of them, they start out getting the associate degree and then progress on to get the baccalaureate and master's and subsequently doctorate. But again, there are sometimes the stumbling blocks. If you decide, well, all I wanted was the associate degree, but I do want to move up in management, then sometimes, oh, well, you need to have a bachelor's degree in order to get that position as an assistant nurse manager or as a nurse manager. And even if you had the baccalaureate degree, well, you need to get the master's degree. But yet sometimes their white counterpart who has a bachelor's, they get it. And if you're questioned about it, or if you say, well, why this person versus me, we both have the same experience. Oh, well, they've agreed to go and work on their master's. But yet it wasn't offered to you to say, we'll give you this, this position with the proviso that you start working on your master's within the next, X amount of time. So again, some of those built-in little stings, if you will, in the workplace setting as well, that denies the opportunity for advancement. One of the things we need to realize is, of course, education means a change in a whole, from a generation onward, because obviously it creates generational wealth. It means that instead of working at a salary for a nursing assistant I'm now working at a salary for a registered nurse, which means it may be, twice the amount that I would be being paid as a nursing assistant, which means now that I can create some generational wealth for my family and subsequently, thereafter, as opposed to perhaps living paycheck to paycheck. Although we do know some nurses, as we found in the study that maybe we'll talk about, they were also living paycheck to paycheck, and that was a really gut punch as well to realize the economic impact that the recent pandemic had on nurses of color in general as well.
We're definitely going to jump into that, because that's kind of a pillar of a lot of the action that has gone forward. But I'd like to roll back a bit and talk about the impact in education, or the experiences in education. They're happening today. They're still happening today. And we don't have a sufficient number of faculty or advisors who look like us. And so it's still treading a fine line to have our voices heard, or simply have understood how we show up in the world and how our experiences impact our educational journey. So,
absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think there's two ways to approach that. When I was president of the ANA, one of the things I would do when I had conversations with deans and directors of nursing programs, I would tell them that, put yourself in the place of a student, a prospective student that's coming to your, potentially coming to your school, and make that student a minority. It doesn't have to be a Black student. It could be an Asian student or a Native American student or whatever. But as they walk around the halls, do they see someone who looks like them in a faculty position or in a position of authority or administration? And chances are they do not. And so the subsequently message that you're sending them is, you're not welcome here, or if you are here, sit down, keep quiet, and and it just checks the box so that we can ensure that, when the federal government asks, well, how many minority students do you have? We can say, yes, we have, this amount, or we've checked the box. But the thing is, the federal government look at the successful graduation rate. So sometimes we set them up for failure instead of providing opportunities for, engagement that they may need, if there's, or someone that they can go to talk to when they feel, maybe I'm struggling, or I'm having difficulty with this instructor or that instructor. So I try to encourage deans and directors of nursing programs that if you should have faculty that is reflective of the students that you're trying to attract, because otherwise the message you're sending is, we don't want you here, other than to, as I said, to check the box. And again, the federal government doesn't look at your graduation rate all that much. They just want to know that, you have a mixture of, of ethnic minorities within your program. So that's enough to qualify you to, still get, federal dollars like the Pell Grant and, things of that sort. But, but still, if you're truly honest and truly want to be, a very well-rounded program and embrace, the changing society, then yes, what we should be seeing is an increase in ethnic and minority nurses, as well as more men within the nursing profession.
Absolutely. And who are the faces of your recruitment materials? And who are the faces on your website? Those are all indicators of, will I fit in? Am I welcomed in that environment? I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but I just want to do one more thing. In the work environment, you graduate, you get licensed, and you enter the work environment. The challenges don't stop.
No.
And you addressed leadership. And so to make it real for our viewers, I'm going to share an example of what happened to me. And 98% of my career has been in nursing leadership. But there's and I'll ask you if invite you to share one too. But I interviewed for a position, and as soon as I walked into the interview, and this is when there was still face-to-face interviews, I felt a shift, energy shift in the room. And while I was responding to questions, I could see facial expressions that really weren't encouraging. I'll put it that way. Years later, one of the persons on the committee who I trust, and that person trusted me, said, Paulina, the committee made a decision before you even walked in that you were not going to be the successful candidate. Okay. So what I picked, I didn't know what I was picking up, but I knew that there was something amiss in this exchange. Is there one that, so I didn't get the leadership position. I didn't get that one, but is there one or?
Yeah, I can definitely identify the same thing happened to me at, I'm currently at Duke, but this happened at another hospital where I was employed, and actually just down the road at UNC Healthcare. And I worked in the burn center there for 36 and a half years. Well, about 7 years or so into my employment, at the time, my particular position was, the title was the outreach clinician. In other words, my job was to still serve as a staff nurse. It was like 60% doing outreach, going to either other schools of nursing or doing a lot of continuing education for fire and EMS and pre-hospital folks and doctors as well about how to package the patient to send to us so that they wouldn't have, or reduce the potential of them going into shock and all this other stuff if we got the fluids and things started on them, right away. And then 40% of my time was spent at the bedside. Well, the position for assistant nurse manager came open. And, and I had the qualifications because at the time, the minimum qualification was a baccalaureate degree. And by that time, I was in the process of completing my master's degree. And I, interviewed, but did not get the position. And was told when I asked, well, why not? Give me some tips that I can work on for the next time that, because there were 3 assistant nurse manager positions. And I knew that another one was going to be coming open soon as well. And it was like, oh, no, you did everything right. It's just that we think you're doing a really great job where you are, with the work that you're doing. And was told that a couple of times, actually, when the next position came open as well. Had it not been for the fact that I really, truly loved my job, I probably would have left. But I look back on this and I think, I rely on my faith that the Lord doesn't close one door, that he opens another one. And had I remained, or had I gotten that assistant nurse manager and probably subsequent nurse manager position, I would not be the individual that I am today. I would not have gone on to become president of, the North Carolina Nurses Association, or president of ANA, or, the campaign that, they're working on as far as with the Commission to Address Racism in Nursing, and also, again, to get more men and ethnic minority nurse individuals into the nursing profession as well. So I believe that, that there was a plan for that. And even though, yes, I became nationally and internationally known for the work that I was doing with burns, which, again, shed the light on that particular institution. Who knows what may have happened had they did offer me that job, and I would have been just secluded there and just be known within that particular hospital, and that's it. Maybe in the the burn world, but not as prominent as my career was.
Well, Dr. Grant, I mentioned that you received a presidential award for Nurse of the Year, and it was due to that work with burn victims, especially during 9/11, I believe. It was, but your expertise and your impact in the care of burn individuals spans many decades. So kudos to you for that very excelling, educating, and providing care in that difficult specialty of caring for burn patients.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So if you've just dropped into this episode, Dr. Grant and I have just been talking in general about experiences that Black nurses have in nursing. And so I'd like to move to the ANA reckoning statement. So during your tenure as the first male president of the American Nurses Association, the largest association that cares for the interests of over 4 million nurses in the United States, how did this reckoning statement come about?
Well, the reckoning statement came about as a result of the murder of George Floyd, and also the murder of other people of color as well. I think of Miss Taylor and a few others that were in the news, but obviously George Floyd's murder was the tipping point. Mm-hmm. And as we looked around, we saw nurses who were just as outraged as the rest of the public was about how that happened. Some of them were on picket lines. Some of them did what nurses do as well. They showed up where these marches were occurring and set up first aid stations and rendered first aid to some of the protesters who were either pelted with whatever by people on one side or the other, and also obviously by in some cases of police officers and such. So that I will say that I had a very progressive board of directors that was with me. It wasn't just me. I mean, obviously, being president, but we all unanimously agreed that something needed to be done, that ANA needed to put out a statement in support of nurses who were doing that, and particularly of nurses of color, because we were beginning to hear more and more about how nurses who had been in the profession for years were feeling and were feeling discriminated against. So we did issue the racial reckoning statement, for communities of color, re-emphasizing the nursing code of ethics that, again, we respect anyone and everyone for who they are, no matter what kind of identifiers that you can put on that individual. Our duty as a nurse is to take care of that individual, and and then go from there, because that person needs us from for that particular moment in time, to help them get through whatever crisis they may have. But then the board decided to go one step further, because as we again beginning to hear this groundswell of nurses of color talking about the discrimination that they had experienced in the work environment, or even as we talked about in education as well, then we decided to create the National Commission to Address Racism in Nursing.
Dr. Grant, before you go on to the commission, I'd like to do a couple things. I'd just like to read the first paragraph of the apology, because this ANA reckoning statement is actually an apology. And perhaps I can drop it into the chat as well, but I'll just read the first one.
Sure.
As leaders of ANA, we apologize for the named and the unaccounted for harms. Our past actions have caused irreparable physiological, psychological, and social economic harm, not only to nurses of color, but to all patients, families, communities that depend on ANA as the national leader of nursing profession. We failed to live up to the professional values established through the Code of Ethics for Nurses and our social contract that guides the relationship between the nursing profession and society, and their reciprocal expectations. In addition, as ANA sought to professionalize nursing, We failed to support a robust education approach that included the appropriate preparation to care for all of our patients, especially patients of color. And it goes on. And I just wanted to share that because the apology was public
Mhm.
and it was specific.
Specific, yes.
Yeah, right. I got
Yes.
my tongue a little tired. Maybe I need some water.
Well, while you're doing that, I will say that that
Mhm.
apology came out of the work of the commission. Once, when the board agreed to form a commission to address
Mhm.
racism in nursing,
Mhm.
one of the things that I realized was that this is something that ANA could do on its own, but it would not look right. That we needed to have bring some other coalition members in, and so we decided that we would have 4 co-chairs. Myself as president of the American Nurses Association, then we had the president of the National Black Nurses Association, the president of the National Association of Hispanic Nurses, and the president of NCMEA, which is the National Coalition of Ethnic and Minority Nurses Association. Each of us would serve as equal co-chairs and would set the agenda, would only move the agenda forward if all 4 of us agreed as to what were going to be some of the next steps and et cetera. And then there were a total of 69 other nursing organizations which joined us. Other either specialty nursing organizations like the medical surgical nurses or the critical care nurses or psych mental health nurses and et cetera. So we brought all of nursing royalty, if you will, together. It was almost like herding cats because the first day that we met was January 25th of 2021. That was the first day that we met. Everybody had their own idea of how we should go about addressing this. And so, to try to calm the waters and et cetera, we said, well, this is our agenda, if you will, or how we want to move forward. And part of that too was I knew that even though, yes, we had agreed that we would address racism from 4 different angles, that being education, that being the clinical or work environment, that being policy, and that being research, that it would not make sense for ANA to say, look at the work that we're doing addressing racism, knowing that ANA itself had a racist past, and that there would be the need for ANA to issue an apology to nurses of color for the wrong that they had endured. And and I said, even if I, as the president, being a Black male, issuing an apology, it wouldn't exactly look right. But if that's what it would take, it would certainly do that. Fortunately, our chief executive officer at the time, Dr. Larissa Cole, stood up and said, "No, I will do it," and it's the right thing to do. And her being, a white female, really drove it home. But we have to look back. Let me go back from a historical perspective. Nurses of color, particularly Black nurses, could join ANA in the early 40s when the National Association of Colored Graduate Nurses ended. ANA approached them about come into the house. There's no sense in having 2 nursing organizations, one for white nurses, one for Black nurses. So come in, be join us and have your voice heard. Well, part of that too, with the National Association of Colored Graduate Nurses joining, was that they said, well, we want ANA to continue to give out the Mary Mahoney Award. Mary Mahoney, the first professional Black graduate nurse, and ANA agreed to do that. And then, but once they came in, it was like the door was shut on them. They could be members, but they could not hold office. And that was mainly because of, again, the prejudice that was happening in the South, as far as, again, the separate but equal, goings on. So it wasn't until the early 60s that nurses of color could hold office within ANA. So it took like 20 years, for them to do that. And it took another, 10 plus years before they elected the first Black president of ANA, which is Dr. Barbara Nichols, who I believe served from 1974 to 1978. But again, so that little historical perspective there, and then it would be another 20 years before the next Black president was elected, and that was Dr. Beverly Malone, and then who was elected in the early 90s, and then another 25 plus years before the third person, that being me, really breaking the glass ceiling, being the third African American and the first male. So all during that time, though, yes, ANA, a lot of minority nursing organizations spun off from ANA because they did not feel that they could have their voices heard. And the first one of those was the National Black Nurses Association. They actually came to ANA, to the leadership of ANA at the time, and said, we want ANA to work more in the Black and Brown community, to address some of the issues that were done there. And to hear Dr. Betty Smith Williams tell you, they were told, well, go start your own organization, because that's not going to happen here. And that's what they did. So the apology that you spoke about, oddly enough, it was issued on the 50th anniversary of the founding of the National Black Nurses Association. And it was a very momentous occasion for everyone, everyone who was there, that ANA would issue the apology to nurses of color. And one of the things that came out of that, and this is, again, still is the work of the commission, but one of the things that came out of that was a lot of people saying, well, we'll accept your apology, but we want to see, your actions. We'll let your actions be louder than your words. My comment to that was, this isn't a journey that ANA can go on by itself. It's going to take ANA working with all the minority nursing organizations, and our path is going to be different with each minority organization, but it's something we have to go on together. So, you can't expect ANA to try to do something and then look back to you for approval. Are we doing this right or not? This is a journey we have to go on together. And by a journey, I interpret that as something is never ending, that, there's going to be twists and turns and, et cetera. But, all the organizations have to work together to ensure that the right things are being done.
Well, thank you for that historical foundation, because it really informs what you're doing now and to go forward. One of the things I want to do, Dr. Grant, is share with the viewers the results of your collaboration to define racism in nursing. And then another major accomplishment or activity that the group did was to conduct a survey. And so I have a couple of results, but if there are other results that you want to highlight, I'd like to share. So let's begin with the defining racism. Would you like to read it?
Sure, absolutely. So this is one of the first things that we did begin to work on once we got everyone together and said, well, how do we define racism? And there were several different definitions that were offered. And that's when I called in my dear friend, Dr. Rumey Alexander, to come in as a consultant, because we're all over the place here, and we need to define racism from a nursing perspective. And so I credit Dr. Alexander with coming up with this definition. And once she presented it, everybody was like, yeah, that's it. That captures everything. But if you look, it says assault on the human spirit. And when you think of the human spirit, that's our soul, that's our conscious. So it really does crushes you to the bone, if you will. And it says in the forms of actions, biases, prejudices, and ideology of superiority based on race persistently that cause a moral suffering and physical harm of individuals and perpetuate systemic injustices and inequities. So again, it really gets you to your core, that so much so that, yeah, you have both moral, not only physical suffering, you know, and by that, think of the person who comes to work in a hostile environment all the time. Yeah, they may put a smile on their face outwardly, but inside, you know, there's that silent killer, if you will, that's going to work. It's going to be, you know, high blood pressure. It's going to be maybe, you know, something going on with their cardiovascular system or their renal system, or, you know, that's that physical harm that maybe we may or may not see. Yeah, physical harm could also result as a result of, you know, an assault, you know, actually striking someone or something like that. But again, it's, and then the moral suffering as well, because I call that either uttering or you know, just really berating someone, that you know, when you hear someone say you're inferior and you hear it all the time, you know, it really does you know, grate on your soul. So it's a chipping away, if you will, of your mere existence. So the one thing we're really um, love about this definition is that it is a nursing definition of racism. So it's something that we as a profession can stand up and say, this is our definition. And the great thing about it is that we have seen other healthcare areas of healthcare adopting this particular definition as well. So I think it hits the nail on the head, you know, as far as, you know, what is going on. And yeah, you could definitely say it's assault on the human spirit or the moral soul of an individual that really does not allow them the opportunity to, you know, to sort of get up, if you will. You know, it keeps you down. It's almost like being in a boxing ring and, you know, you're boxed into a corner and just constantly being assaulted. That's a good analogy that you could use to help define that.
And it's really an assault on what make the core of what makes us human.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna another accomplishment was this survey, and I know it's been a series of surveys, but would you highlight, I have a couple of numbers here, but
Sure.
I've heard you highlight a couple of others. So I'll share the numbers if you want to speak to that.
Sure, absolutely. So leading up to, you know, to this, one of the things that we did too is we held you know, town halls, if you will, asking nurses to call in and talk about their experiences, and also you know, some of the surveys. And the surveys came about as a result of again, what was happening during the pandemic, because we began to see that nurses of color, and particularly Black nurses and Latinx nurses, were more likely to be put in rooms caring for someone who's actively shedding the virus than their white counterparts. We saw that Black nurses were more likely to suffer an economic burden in that they either had to borrow money from family and friends to get over, you know, because if you remember when the pandemic first hit, hospitals laid people off. You know, if you weren't either in labor and delivery, the emergency room, or in critical care, then, you know, the hospitals pretty much shut down. So for nurses who were living paycheck to paycheck, the ability to pay their bills, the ability to repay student loans, you know, things like that, that's where we began to see the economic impact that was happening. They either had to borrow money from family and friends, stop paying bills, stop paying those student loans in order to, you know, try to survive. Now, eventually, yes, they did, you know, go back into work, but for some, it was a period of anywhere from 3 to 6 months before they were called back into the work environment. So we see how, again, with the survey of nurses that we see here in the slide, the nurses that experienced personal experiences with racism, that was either the result of either being called, you know, various names. You know, obviously for Black nurses, the N-word. For you know, Asian nurses, remember there was a lot of rumors being spread around that it was you know, that the virus began in China, and so anyone who looked Asian were you know, they were scrutinized as well, or a lot of patients would refuse care. Hispanic nurses were again discriminated against as well. You know, and they would all three of those, Black, Asian, and Hispanic nurses, reported things like people saying, "Go back to your country," or "You don't belong here," you know, things like that. Or typically it would be is there someone else who could take care of me? I don't want you, providing care, because again, particularly if it was an Asian nurse, because they felt that that person was a carrier of the virus. White nurses, they experienced mostly racism because they were acting as allies. They were standing up for their nurses of color, and because of that, they were discriminated against. So, it's really foreshadowing of how the country was, the mindset of the country at that time, and it makes me wonder if that's foreshadowing of the way the country is today as well. Vigorously divided. When you look at the existence of either you're either with me or against me. Let's just put it that way. And there's no in between, and we don't really have the opportunity to actually look at and discuss the truth of the matter. It's because someone hears something, and because they heard it from a certain individual, they know that to be factual or true instead of checking their own facts. And as a result, things get perpetuated that way. And again, Black nurses say that they experience acts from their leaders as well. Again, here that could be as a result of the example we gave, applying for promotion in a job and being told you don't have all the qualifications, when in actuality you do. But they try to think of some excuse as to why you did not get that job. Again, from patients as well, just not wanting a person of color to take care of them, or even their peers, and some of that is a result of obviously the frustration of the pandemic at the time, and et cetera. But there's no excuse for that. We're all in this together. We should be going through this. But again, as I said, if you saw that ethnic and minority nurses were more likely to be put in rooms caring for patients who were actively shedding the virus, while their white counterparts were back at the desk, or pushing paperwork, or things like that, or taking care of patients who were not infected with the virus, that makes a significant difference as well too.
Well, Dr. Grant, you have given us a very clear, descriptive, and I would even say an emotive description of the experiences of Black nurses. And I only scheduled you for one episode. I see 3 or 4 that we could, and I'm sure you'd accept an invitation to come back. Certainly. But before we close this episode, the description of what's happened has been so clear. What, if you can give us a couple of strategies that the commission has either supported or enacted to address this? And then I love the description of ways to be an anti-racist. If you can give us 1 or 2, that would be helpful.
Certainly. So first of all, if your viewers are interested in finding more about the work of the commission, please go to nursingworld.org. That's nursingworld.org, all one word, and type in the search, the Commission to Address Racism in Nursing, and there you'll find all the work that the commission has done. We did host several, either a podcast or e-learning opportunities to have those difficult conversations, and that's the main thing. What the commission is trying to do is to get nurses to have those difficult conversations. It's not viewed as a black and white issue. It is viewed as an issue that affects us all, because there's racism all the way around. It isn't just one way, but to begin to have that dialogue, and also to get our white colleagues to begin to realize how privileged they are, just because of their skin color. And I sometimes will use as an example, myself and an identical white twin could walk into a jewelry store dressed the way that I'm dressed now in a suit. I guarantee you he's going to get free roam of the jewelry store, and meanwhile I'm going to be followed around and and constantly asked, may I help you, may I help you, just again the differences in our skin color. So to get someone to recognize that, how you may they may not necessarily see that they're privileged as a result of that. But also within that, the commission did come up with 10 tips for being an anti-racist, if you will. Some of those, encourages you to become an ally when you see racist acts or words or whatever being committed. Then stand up, challenge it is something that you really need to do. The other is to ask yourself too, why am I thinking this way? Why am I automatically, when a person of color suddenly walks in the room, why do I automatically assume things about this individual that are not true? And a lot of times, sometimes people are fooled into thinking, well, I don't see color. I provide equal care to everyone. But my response to that is, if you don't see color, then you don't see me. How can you? Because what you're doing is you're lumping me in with every 6'6" African American male, and I'm different from every 6'6" African American male, just like all the others would be. But so how can you identify and begin to coordinate the care that I may need just by simply lumping me in with that group? So until you come to me and say, tell me about Ernest Grant, what can I do to help you today? And what are things that that I need to know about you? How can you individualize that care if you're not going to do that? So that's just a couple of things, is to meet people where they are, because that's what we're doing as nurses anyway. We're meeting people where they are at this particular time in their life and helping them to get over this little mini crisis, or if it means transitioning from this life to the next, we're there to help with that as well. But you do it with a personal touch. You just don't automatically lump them in just because of their ethnicity and think, oh, well, this person, because of their ethnic belief, is this way or that way. You've got to address it on a one-to-one basis.
And as we close, we've really talked about a lot in this hour. I'd just like you to drop into your beautiful heart, Dr. Grant, and share anything that we didn't cover or that your heart feels needs to be said right now as we close.
Oh, yeah. I think, well, a couple of things. One, I would encourage all nurses who or anyone who's listening to this conversation. I have to be a nurse. Anyone who's listening to this conversation, we want to begin to address racism, but you got to be willing to, to have that difficult conversation. Yes, it's going to be difficult at first, but you got to push through that to get to the other side before we have, someone who can be an ally, in the fight against racism. The other thing is, I would encourage those who are watching or listening to this podcast as well to ask themselves the same thing that I ask myself at the end of the day every day, and that is, did I make a difference today? I think if you consciously try to do that, you'll find that you'll have a much better day. You'll view things a little bit differently, and you'll treat your fellow man a little bit different every time as well.
Yeah. Well, this has been enlightening. I've gotten to know you so much more, Dr. Grant. The viewers have gotten to know you so much more. And I just thank you for bringing the light to this often very dark, invisible situation that hundreds of thousands of nurses of all colors, maybe millions of nurses of all colors, especially Black nurses, experience. And I'd like to close this time together with just asking you to just participate with me in a closing. And again, we're going to use the breath to kind of give us some introspection and to find the strength that's within us to do this work, whether you're white, Black, brown. As Dr. Grant said, this is work that we all need to do together. So as we conclude our time today, I invite you to join us in a grounding meditation, and it's going to take about 2 minutes. And we're creating a space together where healing begins with awareness and use of the breath. So I invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze. And if you'd like, you can put your hand over your heart. It's in your left chest area. And again, we're going to use the breath. So I'm going to ask you when you breathe in to breathe in some nurturing items. And then when you breathe out, you're breathing out things that don't serve you well. And I'll guide you, okay? And so I ask you to take a nice, slow, deep breath in. And then when you need to exhale, then you just exhale. But whenever you breathe in, I want you to draw in the strength and courage from those who have paved the way, like Dr. Grant and his commission for justice and equity in nursing. I'd like you in your next breath to breathe in the resilience of those who have stood against racism and discrimination, and filling your lungs with their persistent hope. Now we're going to focus on exhale. So we breathe in, and then when you exhale slowly, release the burdens of injustice, the weight of exclusion, and any personal experiences of racism that do not serve your spirit or your calling. You're going to exhale and let go of doubt and fear, releasing them to the leaves that can be carried away by a gentle stream, knowing they are part of what shape us, but do not define our future. And as you just allow yourself to breathe in whatever rhythm your body wants to, I'd like you to just bring in with your breath a nurturing light to every corner of your being, each breath casting away shadows of the past. And let's envision the nursing field as a place of diverse voices and shared goals where every nurse can thrive. Imagine it as a healing space that values all contributions equally, and see yourself actively shaping this reality with your actions and your voice. With one more deep breath in, summon the courage and conviction that healing change is possible and within your reach. And I'd like you to hold your breath a little bit, feeling that power. And lastly, we're going to affirm the following. I am a force of healing. I possess all I need to transform this world. And so as we end this session, again, my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you, Dr. Grant. And I know that we'll have another conversation again.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And congratulations to you on your anniversary of your show.
Yes, this is the 3rd anniversary of the show. So yes, thank you. And it's guests like you that keep it going and bring these healing messages to our viewers. So have a good day, Dr. Grant.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So viewers, I just thank you for being with us today to just have the experience and taking this journey of how Black nurses navigate this world, all the while keeping focus on what our purpose is, and that's to care for our patients and care for our community who need us the most. So I ask you to join me every first and third Sunday right here on blackdoctor.org. And until I see you again, I wish you love and light. And I'm going to share some resources for you, my healing book, and also my website. So thank you.